Atkins, and this is Benji Damron. We are from Spry Digital, and we're going to talk to you about Decoupled Drupal 8 today.
Okay, so we started on our first Drupal 8 site a while ago, let's just say. A lot of things we really liked. Some things have had us banging our head against the wall, but I'd probably like to talk about the good stuff first. So, Twig. Anybody here used Twig yet? Done any Drupal 8 yet? No? A little bit? Has anybody ever themed a Drupal 7 site? Twig is way easier. It is way easier.
Twig is a front-end templating language that comes from a company called Symfony. It's used in plenty of other projects and other frameworks. It's really well supported, really well documented. So if you're using it and you have questions, it's really easy to find answers for it. It allows you to do a lot of work inside of the templates that was harder to do before we had Twig. So yeah, it's a really good language. It's pretty easy to get into.
You don't have to do a lot of the pre-processing that you do in Drupal 7 because Twig will just do it for you. Like if you need to truncate a body of text or do date formats, pretty much there's an extension for it, and if not, you can write your own if you want to get crazy about it. Another cool thing, you can now do display modes both for your forms and the front-end display through the UI. In Drupal 7, you used to have to do this with code. It wasn't hard, but you still had to write a module just to get a new display mode. So all you have to do now, as you can see, you can add a display mode for just about any entity you would want. And it's just a matter of adding one and naming it. And apparently that's not working. Oh no. Choosing the type. And then you just give it a name. And you're done. And before you would have to create at least 2 files in a directory to do that. So that's actually pretty awesome. Views. Everybody's familiar with views or has used views. Yeah, you're pretty much not building a Drupal site without views. And basically, for those of you that aren't familiar with it, it's basically a GUI to write SQL queries for you. So, and the cool thing about it being in core is you don't have to go and get the module, install it, do all that. It's just there. And then one of the even nicer things about that is you can actually use Twig in views. So, I know some of you have probably done this. You don't have to admit it. You've put PHP directly in one of these fields. And you know you're not supposed to do that, but sometimes it happens. Now you can do if-else statements using Twig right here, or any of the other processing that Twig does. So that has made it a lot of fun to work with. And it's pretty much, everything's pretty much still the same place it was. So if you're familiar with Drupal 7, at least from this side of it, not the code at all, of course, but you still have, the only thing I think they've really changed is changed modules to extend. But everything else seems to be in about the same place. So now, the bad point. So views, although it's in core, there are still some weird things going on with it. Dates, you can't actually use a date picker on. It's a text string, it's not a date. So we wanted to make this search that had a date field. And we were able to do that. But I had to write a form alter to basically turn the title field, because we're putting the date in the title, to turn our title field into a date it's still a title. See, I'm getting confused about what I had to even do here. It's still a title field, but we're in this form. It is a date field, and it looks at the string with it contains, and it will return things with based on the date. It's currently broken on my local, so we're not going to really show you anything there. But it does work. Pretty hacky. I wasn't happy about it, but we were able to get it to work. But I think in 8.4 it's going to actually handle dates, and they're not just strings. There's another thing that we were going to use. Has anybody ever used Search API Autocomplete? Yeah, it works pretty nice in 7. You would type something in 8, and it would just refresh the page and nothing would happen. So we needed an autocomplete search with formatting. So Matthew basically wrote this himself.
So this is just it's JavaScript type ahead, basically.
I only have one contact in here right now, so. Well, I have some auto-generated that failed, as you can see, because they didn't return anything like they should. But yeah, so that took us a while, but mainly because we were fighting Drupal the whole way to get it to work. But it was kind of fun to figure out at the same time.
Yeah.
Inline entity form. Inline entity form, anyone ever use that one? Yeah, so if you use it the way they want you to use it, it's pretty cool. But we wanted it to look a little nicer and do a few other things. So, because I don't know, I don't have it working the standard way, but when you click, usually, it'll open a form. Well, this one's working the standard way. And it can get kind of confusing as to where you are, because this is a user node within, or I'm sorry, a user within a node, within the node form. So it's like, where am I even at this point? So we looked into trying to do some modals or something, and Matthew, again, helped me out here. It isn't a true modal, but it does make it a little less confusing.
Because we couldn't add a modal for some reason, right?
Yeah, there's some, it's, the way this works, the field names change for every single one, so there was no real way to target any of the fields. It adds a hash to the end of each field name. So I don't know what you did here, CSS or something?
Yeah, so here, we needed a modal. We needed this form to come pop up in a modal. So just a nicer UI approach to handling this form. We couldn't get it with what Drupal was giving us. So we basically took that form that you saw pop down a minute ago and spoofed a modal, just some CSS and some styling to get it to look like it does. Mostly because it was just a workaround. We couldn't get it to work or do what we needed.
Yeah, they've even flat out said they're not going to do it, the people who maintain the module. So if they're not going to do it. And I hope this will do it. Yep. So before, Matthew had to do this too. That error message there was coming in behind this. So you'd see this pink edge of a pink box sticking out and had no idea what your error was. But now it's up here in the corner. And you know that a title. Okay. And it's just even changing the labels, because we wanted to change these so the language was a little less confusing, because I believe it's add a producer. I can't remember what it was even.
The default?
Yeah, the defaults were like add node.
Right.
And it's like, well, what is that? But yeah, it's if I ever have a standard project where it's a little more straightforward, I'll use this again, but I think I'm done with it for now because it has not been fun. So with all that, we decided maybe we should go a different way the next time.
Yeah, so we had enough issues on the front end in trying to get Drupal to work the way we needed it to, and to do some of this stuff. We're looking at decoupling now. Does anybody know much about this at all? So it's basically removing the front end of the site from the CMS, and so you're separating your concerns. Where you have to, that way we can bring our own front end. We can do what we need to do without worrying about trying to fight Drupal and trying to make things work, or trying to get workarounds, stuff like that. It basically gives us more power on the front end to just kind of do what we really need to do. And like I said, we can that way you can bring your own front end. The back end, so Drupal itself can be purely a content and data machine. It doesn't have to worry about what it's going to present. We don't have to worry about any of, I don't know what you call it, just like the way, or the visuals. We can get much cleaner code on the front end, and like when we're templating sites that way.
And I don't have to say, well, that's just how it is.
Yeah.
Because I've said that a lot with this project. But like Matthew's saying, there are some nice things that are in Drupal that we would also lose with this.
Yeah, when we're bringing all this, so Drupal, you can do things like have user authorization. So if you need to log into a site and stuff like that, we could still have that information stored in the data, but we would have to then also, instead of using like a Drupal module to add login fields and such like that, we would then need to build those ourselves and kind of bring it to it. So there's a little bit of give and take. You get like all these nice things whenever you're doing this, but then there's also things you can lose. Something else that's just a quick example is built-in pagination. We're gonna have to do that ourselves if we don't use the Drupal or what Drupal gives us. So those are just some of the things. There's plenty more examples, I'm sure, like different things that you could use.
Security issues, lots of things to think of. But if it means we can actually do what we want on the front end, then we'll figure those things out.
Yeah. Well, whatever front end framework you're using, you might have plugins and stuff that we could use as well to help with those. We just have to be able to touch that data and get something back from that.
So we're actually not very far along at all on our second site. We thought we would be when we proposed this session.
We're still learning too.
Yeah, we're still learning, and we're also, we do have billable work to do, so we've been busy with that. So we looked into this distribution called Contenta, which basically, we'll show you what it returns, but it's basically what it says there in the slide.
It's an API first Drupal distribution. It takes you use this through Drupal, and you build your data model, and it creates an API for you that you can hit. It will let you use like a RESTful API, JSON returns, and I think if you know what GraphQL is at all, you can use GraphQL now. But yeah, it makes it really easy to use Drupal as your data model, and then on the front end we can just pull from those APIs to build our front end.
So it wasn't super easy to get installed. You have to do it from the command line, and you have to install Composer first, and then you run this command here, but then it's going to time out on you, and you're going to get like a memory error, at least on your local. If you're on a decent server, you're probably going to be okay, but like running on your own VM, it's going to just say, nope, not going to do that. So you have to run this next little snippet here where you raise the memory limit to be unlimited, which probably isn't the best thing to do, but if you want to get this installed, that's how it's going to happen. And it takes a while. It takes a good 20 minutes probably for it to install everything it needs in the project, because it's not just installing the profile, it's installing Symfony and Drupal and all the dependencies and everything else. And then once it's installed, oh, that's on that. You wind up with this site. And it actually has really good documentation and tutorials. They're video tutorials, and they're very thorough, kind of dry, as most Drupal videos usually are. But they're really helpful. And it also shows you how to hit the API. Did you want to go over this?
Yeah, so this is the inside of the Drupal site using Contenta. As you are building out your data model, it's also, like I said earlier, creating your JSON API and building this documentation for you. So when you're using whatever framework you're using to hit that API, you always have this as a reference to come in and see like your data. So I think yeah, I'm looking. So this has got a bunch of just content in here that was kind of oh yeah. So when you install this, you can install like a demo site, and what they do is they have a recipe site. Oops, I hit the wrong thing. So here's like for that recipe data. It gives you all your endpoints that you can hit over here. It tells you responses, but it's all available. It has your get request, post, I'm not sure what this one is, patch, and then probably delete.
Patch is probably update.
Yeah. So, and it shows you a little bit of what your return should be in your JSON. I haven't used the GraphQL yet. I'm assuming would look similar to this if you have that running. And then I can actually show you.
And I'm not sure if you saw everything in the sidebar there, but pretty much anything, like down to displays, forms,
We have
users,
taxonomy,
pretty much
vocabulary.
any entity or configuration you can hit from this.
Yeah, so this is all the data that we're storing inside of our Drupal site that we can touch through an API or through the API that they're creating. And I'm going to show you really quick. There's this tool called Postman that we've been using that allows you to test your API, and you can run requests and stuff. So here's our API, or our URL with our API endpoints. You can send. We're gonna do a GET request here, just to get that recipe data that I was just talking about. Hit send. It's already spun, but it's gonna run. And so this is the data that we get back for all that recipe information from Drupal that is running on a development site that we have. But it's just this has been a really good tool as far as like trying to figure out like what data you're trying to find. You can go through all the data here, and helps you when you're templating your site and you have to loop through everything. And it's better than just logging it to the console or something as you're building a site and trying to look at everything that way. So, but yeah, this tool is called Postman. I would recommend if you're doing anything like this.
And it's free.
It's free too. Yeah. So, I think I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to show you here. Do you want to show me any other parts of Contenta?
Well, they're looking at tutorials tab.
Okay.
And as you can see, there are several videos that show you how to get all this stuff going. So if you have the time to watch a video. Wow, there's a lot here. Way more than I realized. Okay.
So we talked about some of the nice things earlier. You know, we talked about Twig and some of those things that are built in, or that Drupal brings to the table now, and they're great. But when you're going headless, we're kind of throwing all that out and bring our own stuff. So the front end templating, or the templating and front end system is built and maintained separately. So these are just some generalizations about the front end. The way we're doing this, and I'm not sure if there's a better way or this or what, but we have basically two repositories, for one for the back end of the site, one for the front end of the site, because it's decoupled. So that's what, you know, we maintain those separately. Another nice thing about doing it this way is that you can have multiple front ends. You can have, you know, if you got a site that is maybe like a news site, you might want to have, you might have like a web presence, you might have mobile, you could even have a desktop app or something like that. The point is you can bring multiple different kinds of front ends and access that same install of all the Drupal data, and you don't have to build multiple apps for that. You're just, you know, you're building one source of data and you're hitting it from all these different places. Yeah, another nice thing is that the front end can be built, rebuilt, changed, all that, without having to actually make any changes to Drupal, because, so, you know, you've got this site that's got all this content, and client comes back and says, hey, we want to do this redesign of the site. You don't necessarily have to reinvent your Drupal install and your all that. So that takes a huge chunk of work out that you don't have to do. You can just rebuild your front end site if it's just a simple redesign. And like I said, you don't have to worry about really messing with the Drupal side. It makes it really easy. It kind of helps future-proof, I guess, a little bit. But that's one of the really nice things that, you know, going forward with like a decoupled approach really kind of lends to the table. Your framework that you're going to choose is, I mean, you can use anything. It could be, some of the big ones like I've listed here are Vue, React, and Angular. We are choosing to use Vue.js. It's a really good framework as far as, it's a JavaScript framework that kind of mixes some of the better parts of React and Angular and a couple others. But all of these are really popular, and there's many more. You could use, you know, it could be a mobile SDK for whatever, you know, your Apple device or Android or whatever you're using, or whatever you're building for, I guess. It could be an Xbox app, you know. It could be whatever you need for it to access that data. So, yeah, the framework for your front end really is kind of up to you. But the nice thing is that you can use what you're most comfortable with. You can use what you need to build for or what you want. You don't have to only use what Drupal gives you in this case. So, you know, if you've got a team where you're building out all these different apps or front-end apps, your team can kind of use what you're gonna, you know, what you're gonna need to use. You don't have to worry about the Drupal side of that anymore. Although Twig is nice. So, we kind of flew through that.
Well, and there are some that are already built in, I believe. Or, let's see, yeah, they've got there's one for Angular, Elm, Ionic, Chatbot, and they're making more. Like the Vue.js one isn't quite there, but I don't think we were going to try to use theirs, really.
No.
Yeah.
What does it mean? What's available?
These are already made to work with this particular profile.
I think these are demos that, using these different front-end frameworks that
Right.
the people behind Contenta have already created.
Okay. So
And they give you the code if you want
I got
to
it.
get to it yourself.
It's really helpful when you're trying to learn how to use some of this. You can actually go in and kind of see how they've built some of their stuff. Yeah, that's honestly kind of it. That's what we had. Does anybody have any questions about?
Or does anybody have anything to share where they've done any headless stuff? No?
what does it mean to build out the data model in this kind of situation?
It's pretty much the same as how you would build a regular Drupal site. You still have content types.
So are you using the regular Drupal interface?
Yeah, we're still going to have the admin on the back end and use that for the content entry as well.
Okay.
Because there's no crazy interaction that needs to happen there.
Yeah, so we found Contenta, and it makes Contenta is what like creates that API for you. But like, yeah, you're still building all the rest of your content out.
You're doing all your text on the
Yeah, you could still.
the regular UI.
Yeah.
Would you still be using views then?
This doesn't use views,
No.
but you can make JSON views. So if you needed to get that specific, you could.
And I believe you could still potentially, if you needed to, you build out like a normal Drupal site as well as, have this API that you're exposing. I think you can kind of mix those. I haven't really looked into it.
Yeah, you could still theme it with Twig if you wanted to.
Yeah. And then still expose that data for other sites or other needs. We were a little quick, but I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any, as long as I can answer it.
Yeah.
What about in the back end of contentability? Who gets to see what?
I think you'd have to still set up roles and
Yeah.
permissions and all that. But the way it looks is that you can pretty much hit any of it through the API. Because there was user stuff there. We are able to update and post and all that. So a lot of concerns there. But yeah, you still have permissions and all that.
It handles like authentication and stuff like that too. So as you're building these front end apps or whatnot to hit this, you're gonna need to you don't want to just have some open API that anybody can hit. So it handles all that for you using. I think you can use OAuth and a few other methods to limit access. Yeah. Well, if anybody else got any questions, feel free. Otherwise, we're kind of done. I think.
Thank you.
Yeah.